even about the most obscure areas of jurisprudence.
Right.
You work it out, and eventually you find out it's a political debate.
Right.
Thank you so much for these amazing presentations. My question, I guess, is comes out of reading the book *The Mantle of the Prophet* by Roy Mutadeh, who describes education in the Qom, I guess, 1950s, 60s. And so firstly, I'm curious, he talks a lot about the importance of logic and reasoning training and the study of Aristotle and other Greek philosophers as the sort of the foundational layer of education in the seminaries in Qom at that time. And I'm curious to what extent that's still the case. And I'm also curious, I want to push you more on this question about mysticism and Sufism, because in that book there's also a sort of an amazing chapter about the dimension of mystical training as sort of integrated into the seminary training to some extent, although it's slightly different. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about how that works today in Qom. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So, Professor Gleave, tell us more about Jamkaran then, because that seemed like an eminently interesting place.
Okay.
That's the place you didn't get to.
Yeah, we ran out of time. You all were looking a bit tired by the time I got to the Maidan, and I thought we probably need to go for a cup of tea.
Jamkaran is
Sir, by any chance, since this was Jerusalem and Qom, from personal experiences with Iraqi Ayatollahs, some knew Talmud, some could quote Talmud. Have you had experiences, like literally by heart, when they didn't even know a Jew was coming to see them?
I'd like to ask what is in Iran, but perhaps also in the yeshivot, I'm not sure I know. What is their self-perception? Do they sustain the world by learning? I understand that the state supports all their studies, and is there any, is that perfectly fine for to be a whole life student and sort of unproductive in society?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Shall I? Okay, I'll work backwards from the last question. Actually, there isn't. There's good tax breaks to being a Hausa student, but you're not a state employee. You're not paid by the state. You're paid by the Hausa, by the particular madrasa on which you're on their Shahriye list. And their money comes from pious donations of the Shia. The Shia have quite a well-developed taxation system, religious taxation system, which is voluntary, but it's voluntary in the sense that no one's going to force you to do it. It's obligatory in the sense that it's religiously obligated, and in which you're supposed to give a fifth of your wealth, different categories of wealth. It's a complicated system, but to a Ayatollah, with which he will run his Hausa, and with that, he pays for the building and the electricity bill and everything else, but he also pays the Shahriye of the students. So by getting onto the list, you become, so it's not really it's not state support, but you get breaks. You don't have to do military service, for example, in Iran, if you're a Hausa student. And there has been some criticism. Some people go into Hausa students in order to go into Hausa in order to avoid military service. This may sound familiar. The idea is that you choose to be a Hausa student and you're accepted in on the basis of your educational merit. But you can get on a Shahriye list if you're well connected. So that's one thing. In terms of the self-perception, I think that they some of them do have the idea that the scholars, without the maintenance of scholarship, the community will. It's not really a sort of apocalyptic vision that it will collapse, but that identity will disappear. We won't be ready for when the imam returns. this future messianic figure if we don't maintain our scholarship. So there is that emphasis, but primarily you are studying in the Hausa in order to learn and do a service to the community. It's not that you're doing something vicariously for the rest of the community. It's that you are learning it. And what is the point of a Hausa? A point of a Hausa is to provide scholars who can then provide guidance to the rest of the people who don't become scholars. That's the point of a Hausa. In fact, some people say the point of a Hausa is to train ayatollahs, okay? Most people don't become ayatollahs, but the point of the Hausa is that you have a whole system for the 1% that become ayatollahs, because the community needs ayatollahs. Because without ayatollahs, you don't know what to do when you pray, you don't know what to do when you fast. You have to follow an ayatollah, and that's the point of the Hausa, is to produce that 1% of students. So you teach 100, one becomes an ayatollah. That's the point of the Hausa system. There's a lot of wastage along the way, but that's not so important. So in terms of mysticism, Sufism, and Aristotelian logic, well, there's a big debate about the position of philosophy within the Hausa curriculum. Some people say that philosophy should have no role whatsoever in the Hausa curriculum, that it's a foreign, Greek, primarily science, which has been imported into Islam, and they are heavily critical of it. That is primarily a Najaf position. Qom position is very heavily philosophically orientated in how important it is. So in Qom, it's always gained an important part, and that's part of the reason why Roy Mutahadeh in his book brings that out very nicely, because he's studying a mullah who is a well-known mullah, who is quite a famous scholar, who studied in Qom, and obviously did philosophy as part of his study. But it's not really, they don't stop at ordinary Aristotelian philosophy. Really, the point of doing Aristotelian philosophy is so that you can study Mulla Sadra properly, so that you can study the context for Mulla Sadra. That's why they do it. And Mulla Sadra sort of dominates the curriculum in philosophical training within Qom. And finally, and Talmud. No, I've never heard. I can believe it. There's a center called the Markaze Duruse Adyan in Qom, which is the center for the study of religions. I visited there once, and we had a little seminar. These guys know lots and lots. They can tell me the difference between Melkite and Jacobite very easily. They know the different denominations of the Christian church, and I wouldn't be surprised if the experts on Judaism within that. I went down into their library. They've got the Talmud. They've got all of these things, and they're voracious users of information technology. They have these things. So Hebrew is being taught in a probably rather haphazard way, but it's nonetheless being taught within the Center for the Study of Religions. So it's an important element of it. They also have experts on Buddhism and Hinduism and mullahs who are experts and they're interested in it not just to convert people to Islam. They're interested in it because one of the things about the Hausa is you don't just learn things in order to convert other people. You learn things because knowledge has value. And finally, Jam Quran. Well, I was going to talk about that. This is the challenge to the Hausa in modern Iran. The Jam Quran Mosque just outside of Qom is a messianic center, or a center for messianic hopes. It's believed that in the late 10th century, the imam who had gone into hiding made his one personal appearance at Jam Quran to a traveler whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but he Hassan Mufli, I think his name was, and he was in Jam Quran, and people said, "There's a guy sitting underneath the tent over there. You should go and speak with him." And he said, and I went and I spoke, and I realized I was speaking with the imam, and the imam told me that from now on there must be a mosque here as the one place where the imam appeared after his disappearance. Actually, there are a few other people that believe the Imam appeared to them in different places. But nonetheless, Jamkaran had a mosque, and it's believed that there's a well just behind the mosque where people throw prayers, and they go straight through to the hidden Imam in order to be answered, and that at the end of time, the Imam will appear there. The orthodox ulama, for want of a better term, orthodox, but if you can use the term, the mainstream ulama are highly suspicious of this movement. They consider it a threat to their authority. They consider it folk religion. It's a sort of like corrupted form of Shia Islam. It's promoted by President Ahmadinejad, and it's considered really quite dangerous by a large number of people studying Qom. And that's one thing which, if you learn anything about the Hausa in Qom, is that there's enormous tensions within it between those that are supporting Ahmadinejad and support this form of messianic Shiism, and those who believe that Shiism is about learning, and we need to study. And we can't predict when the Imam's going to come, and we can't have wells where we throw prayers for him to answer them. This is all folk religion. What you need is scholarship and study. And that is an element of the Jamkaran position, which has received, reportedly $10 million the day after Ahmadinejad got elected as president, first time round. Although maybe he didn't get elected second time round, but that's a different matter. First time round, the day after, he gave $10 million to the Jamkaran mosque, supposedly. That's what you hear, because he wants to promote that form of Shiite piety.
אני חושבת, עם זה נסיים את התוכנית. אני רוצה להודות לכל המרצים. I want to thank Professor Gleib very much, our visiting scholar, Dr. Yehuda Mirsky, Professor Eitan Kולברג, and yourselves. תודה רבה.